In a city where lights never slept and dreams were often made of diamonds and silk, Adrian Wolfe reigned at the top of the business world. He was a self-made billionaire. Brilliant and bold, but also guarded and skeptical of people's intentions. His heart had long been locked away. Until he met Celeste Avery. A woman with laughter like wind chimes and a spirit that couldn't be bought. Celeste wasn't after wealth. She met Adrian by accident, literally when she spilled coffee on his custom-made Italian suit at a bookstore cafe. She apologized with a nervous smile and offered to buy him a new one. Adrian, used to being feared or flattered, found himself laughing instead. From then on, their story bloomed like roses in spring. They spent rainy afternoons exploring antique bookstores, took moonlit yacht rides, and danced barefoot in their marble kitchen to old jazz songs. Despite their riches, their greatest luxury was each other's presence. Celeste grounded Adrian. He opened up, became softer, and more kind. She taught him how to live, not just succeed. Adrian often said, "If I ever lost you, I wouldn't know how to breathe." He never imagined those words would be tested so soon. One day, fate struck like lightning. Celeste went out to run a simple errand and never came back. She was hit at a pedestrian crossing by a car driven by Isla Moreno, a young woman who shared an almost eerie resemblance to Celeste. Same long lashes, delicate features, and kind demeanor. Isla was a nursing student, loved by many, and completely unaware someone had drugged her drink at a gathering that night. Her world blurred, and in a haze, she drove straight into Adrian's universe and shattered it. Celeste died hours later. Adrian's world collapsed. Blinded by grief and rage, Adrian couldn't accept that the woman he adored was gone. Especially at the hands of someone who looked so hauntingly similar. It felt cruel and wrong. Almost like the universe mocked him. Instead of letting the courts handle justice, Adrian, the rich, powerful, and now ruthlessly broken, wanted to use his influence in dark ways. He secretly tracked Isla's life, and when she was released on bail pending trial, he struck. He offered her a job at one of his foundation's health charities under a false name and purpose. Using his legal team to twist the system just enough. He painted himself as someone ready to forgive publicly. But in private, he had other plans. Adrian made Isla work long, punishing hours under close supervision. He'd publicly praise her, then privately humiliate her with passive-aggressive tasks. Making her clean files that didn't exist, run errands in the rain, and face constant whispers from those he paid to undermine her. He even arranged for Isla to be interviewed at a charity gala, only to ask her, on stage, how it felt to take someone's future away. She stood frozen, shame burning her face, yet never left. Adrian wanted her to suffer. And she did. But what he didn't expect was her resilience. Her sorrow wasn't theatrical, it was quiet and genuine. She cried when no one watched. She planted lilies at Celeste's memorial site every week. Not for forgiveness. But because she truly couldn't live with herself, and slowly, the man who had once loved purely, and now hated blindly, began to question if vengeance was truly bringing him peace. Or just digging Celeste's memory deeper into pain. Adrian Wolfe, once the man who spoke poetry to Celeste under golden chandeliers, now moved like a ghost through his days. His eyes no longer warmed when they landed on beauty, not even when they landed on Isla Moreno. The woman who wore Celeste's face like a cruel mirror, and the one who had taken her away. Though Isla didn't know the full truth, she felt it in every room she entered at the Wolfe Foundation. Something was wrong. Something watched. She had taken the job offer because the court had frozen her education funds. She'd been grateful. She needed to stay afloat. Needed something to hold on to. What she didn't know was that Adrian had hand-picked her to suffer. He ensured she had no allies at the office. Her tasks were menial, sometimes impossible. Files missing from shelves. Coffee for the boardroom. Delivered late by seconds. Said by supervisor she was scolded by him, who was only following Adrian's whispered orders. One time, he assigned her to sort through a box of old letters. What she didn't know was that they were Celeste's personal love letters to Adrian. Handwritten, scented with lavender, and folded with tenderness, Adrian sat in the shadows of the hallway as she read them. He watched Isla's fingers tremble. Her lips press into a line. She didn't cry. She didn't flee. She quietly and respectfully repacked the letters and brought them to his office. "You dropped these in the wrong department," she said with tight voice. Adrian leaned back in his leather chair, eyes cold. "Did I? Must have been an accident." She paused. "I'm sorry." He tilted his head. "Are you?" The silence between them thickened. Isla's eyes, shadowed with guilt, met his. "You think a sorry can undo death?" he asked, voice soft but razor-sharp. "No," she whispered. "Nothing can." He let her stand there, 1,000 emotions passing over her face. But he gave no satisfaction. Only dismissed her with a wave. The next week, he had her assigned to the rooftop greenhouse project. Celeste's favorite place in the building, now locked in memory and dust. He demanded Isla to clean it. Alone. Without gloves and tools. "Make it bloom again, you owe that much," he said. She bled her hands pulling weeds. Broke her nails scrubbing bird droppings off statues. She found petals, dried and fragile, tucked into old journals that Celeste had once written in. She didn't read them. She never once invaded more than she had already destroyed. Adrian watched from the security cameras, day after day. And yet, no matter how he pushed her, Isla did not fight back. She didn't quit. She showed up. She took every silent punishment and wore it like a crown of guilt. To him, it wasn't enough. Nothing could ever be enough. Not for taking Celeste from him. Not for having her face, her kindness. And her softness. Like some broken replacement, one afternoon, Isla collapsed from exhaustion in the rooftop garden, surrounded by scattered rose petals and mud. The staff found her and called a medic. Adrian was told immediately. But he didn't rush to see her. He stayed in his office, staring out at the gray city beyond the windows. Let her suffer, he thought. But in his chest, something twisted. A small traitorous echo of Celeste's voice. "Adrian, we don't destroy people to feel whole again." He shook it away. He wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But even thorns grow tired of blood. And slowly, quietly, his heart began to ask. How much further could he go before the man Celeste loved disappeared forever? Adrian Wolfe was a man built from ice and ambition. But now he was cracking, every time he saw Isla Moreno, bent over from exhaustion and quietly planting flowers in the rooftop garden Celeste once loved, something shifted in his chest. At first, it was confusion and guilt. Then something far more dangerous. A tenderness. He didn't want to feel it. Didn't ask for it. But he couldn't ignore how Isla apologized even when she didn't need to. How she treated everyone kindly, even those who whispered behind her back. She never once raised her voice or asked why she was being punished. Only endured. It was the way she knelt in the dirt with scraped knees and cleaned those forgotten corners of the greenhouse like she was atoning for a sin she'd never meant to commit. How she talked to the roses as if they were her only friends. How she once left tea at the desk of a janitor who was having a bad day. There was something about her, something, painfully Celeste, yet not. Isla didn't replace Celeste. She couldn't. But she reminded Adrian of the parts of life that were still soft. Still human. And that terrified him, because if he began to feel again, he might break, so instead of kindness, he buried his tenderness in sharper orders and heavier burdens. Print and bind these reports, he said one evening, handing Isla 3 thick stacks with only hours before deadline. She took them without complaint, even though her hands were still raw from gardening. Do you ever get tired of pretending to be sorry? He asked cruelly. I don't pretend, she said quietly. I am sorry. Every day. He looked away. Isla's eyes were too much sincere. Too much like Celeste's when she forgave him for forgetting an anniversary. He turned and left the room, but 5 minutes later. He sent someone to bring her dinner without a name on the tray. This duality became his daily torment. By day, he made her walk through glass. By night, he watched her on the security feed, gently feeding a stray cat that snuck onto the garden rooftop. One morning, she slipped on wet marble stairs and twisted her ankle. Adrian's assistant rushed to get ice ordered by him secretly. He stood down the hallway, out of sight, gripping his phone, not knowing why he cared. She's fine, the assistant later told him. I didn't ask, Adrian snapped. But he slept easier that night. One afternoon, as golden light spilled over the greenhouse glass, Isla sang softly to herself while trimming dying petals. An old lullaby, gentle and broken. Adrian was passing by when he heard it. He stopped, frozen. It was the same song Celeste once sang to calm him during his nightmares. His heart thudded painfully. How could she know it? Why her? He stayed hidden behind the doorframe, jaw clenched. He hated that his body responded to the sound. That a warmth bloomed where only grief had lived. No. He couldn't feel this, he wouldn't allow it, so the next day, he doubled her workload. Gave her the worst assignments. Criticized her in front of the board. Made her work overtime without explanation, and yet, he sent her home safely in his private car. He had the office heater fixed in her department so she wouldn't shiver in silence anymore. He paid for new gloves for her. Delivered anonymously in a plain brown box. He was cruel with his words, but careful with his actions, a man torn between punishment and affection. Vengeance and vulnerability. Hate and something that might be hope, and so, Isla suffered. Never knowing that the man pulling her strings was also secretly pulling her back from the edge. Slowly. Quietly. Against his will, but how long could Adrian hide a heart that was no longer frozen? How long could he pretend she was just the cause of his pain? When she had become the only person keeping him from drowning in it, the days blurred together for Isla Moreno. Sunlight always dimmed by exhaustion, nights filled with silence and questions that haunted her more than nightmares. Why was she still here? Why hadn't Adrian Wolfe fired her? If he hated her so much, the man was ice in a suit, steel with a stare. He never missed a chance to undermine her in public. Never spared her from the worst tasks. And yet, little things didn't add up. Her cheap work shoes had worn through, blistering her feet one morning. She hadn't complained. No one knew. But the next day, she received a new pair. Waited in her locker, untagged, and unspoken, when she caught a fever from working late in the freezing records room, a peppermint-scented tea appeared on her desk the following morning. No name. Just warmth, care and silence. Once, when she spilled a vase in the greenhouse and sliced her palm, she had bandaged it herself quietly. Only to find a sealed pack of antiseptic and silk dressings in her drawer hours later. At first, she thought it was a kind colleague, but no one else ever mentioned it. One day, Isla walked past Adrian's office and noticed the scent of Celeste's favorite perfume. The same brand she had found among the boxes he once accidentally made her sort. She paused. Looked through the frosted glass. He wasn't yelling at someone. Wasn't reviewing files, he was staring at a dried rose on his desk. Her heart ached. She knew that kind of pain. Then she saw something else. On his desk, her file was open. Her name highlighted. A sticky note next to it, no heavy lifting with her ankle. Adjust schedule. She took a step back, her breath caught. Adrian Wolfe was watching over her, not out of kindness, she thought. But out of conflict. He was hurting. And so was she. That evening, she stayed late at the rooftop greenhouse. Not because she had to, but because the silence there didn't judge her. She dug into the soil, slowly nursing new life out of ruined things like herself. She didn't hear Adrian arrive, but she felt his presence, like the air changed temperature behind her. "You're working late again," he said flatly. She didn't turn around while saying, "Someone has to care for this place." Then, his voice, slightly softer. "Why do you bother?" She looked over her shoulder, meeting his eyes. "Because it was hers. And because I broke something I can never fix." He stepped forward, slowly. "You always say that. Do you think saying it enough times makes it easier to forgive yourself?" "No," she said. "But it makes it harder to forget." He stared at her, not with hate, not with anger. But something else, something closer to the man he used to be. Isla's voice dropped. "Why didn't you fire me?" The question hung in the air like a wire between them. Adrian's jaw tightened. Made him look away. "I should have," he said finally. "Maybe I will." But she saw it now. The flicker in his eyes, the way his fingers curled as if he were holding something in, something dangerous and delicate. "You won't," she said gently. He froze. "You hate me and I understand, but you're not cruel." He didn't answer. She walked past him, brushing lightly by his arm, and left him standing there surrounded by the scent of earth and forgiveness. Later that night, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the rooftop garden from the security feed. She had planted new roses. White ones for peace. He shut off the monitor, but not before his lips parted as if to say something, something he still wasn't ready to admit. Adrian Wolfe had always been in control. Of his empire, of his image, of every ticking second in the day. Until Isla Moreno, whose presence was never loud, never demanding, but always there. Like a ghost of a memory and a mirror of something he was terrified to feel again. And he hated that he had stopped hating her. Every time he tried to punish her, her eyes met his with sorrow, not resentment. Every time he tried to break her, she softened. And each act of quiet grace unraveled the cold armor he'd built after Celeste's death. It was on a Thursday evening that it finally broke him. The day had already frayed at the edges. A bored investor had publicly criticized Celeste's past involvement in the foundation, calling her a vanity project of the late girlfriend. Adrian kept calm in the room, but inside, he was shaking. Hours later, he returned to his office, needing silence, only to find a small envelope placed gently on his desk. It was from Isla. She had drawn no attention, left no note of explanation, just a card with watercolor violets hand-painted on the front. Inside, a single line written in delicate script: "She wasn't a project, she was your light. Don't let them dim her name." Adrian stared at the card for a long time. And then, the man made of stone cracked. He shoved his chair back and swept the crystal paperweight off the desk. It crashed to the floor. He ripped open drawers, searching for anything to do with Celeste, her old letters, her photos, her voice in old recordings, and found them all. He played one voicemail on loop. Her laughing voice and her alive voice: "Adrian, did you forget your lunch again? You genius idiot. I left it in the fridge, don't be late for dinner, love you." "Stop," he whispered. But it didn't stop, the voice kept playing. He dropped to his knees. And for the first time since Celeste died, he wept. Not the dignified kind. Not the noble shedding of one or two tears. He is broke, shoulders trembling, heart in pieces, breath coming in short, and ragged gasps as grief flooded out of him like a dam bursting. It wasn't Isla's fault, it never really had been. And the guilt of what he'd done to her, the cruelty wrapped in his grief, hit him like the car that took Celeste away. Hours passed when Isla came to deliver a file. The office door was unlocked. She paused at the sight of him on the floor, face in his hands, broken glass near his desk. She gasped softly. "Mr. Wolfe." Adrian didn't move at first. But then he looked up, eyes red, cheeks wet, stripped of all the coldness he'd worn like armor for months. "Leave," he said hoarsely. Isla didn't move. Instead, she stepped inside and slowly bent down beside him, not touching, just present. Like Celeste had been on his worst nights, like a light in the dark. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if her words could change the past. He shook his head. "You're not the one who should be sorry." Their eyes met, grief meeting guilt, sorrow meeting sorrow. And in that silence, something shifted. The foundation they stood on had cracked completely. But perhaps, that was the only way anything new could grow. 1 year later. A full turn of the season since Celeste's voice went silent, since Isla's life was rerouted by tragedy, and Adrian Wolfe, the man of power, pride, and pain, had begun his silent war. But now, after 12 long months of cruel kindness and hidden care, something else had taken root inside him. Something he could neither admit nor deny. He was in love with Isla Moreno. But he would never say it, not out loud, and not even to himself. Isla had changed over the year. Grown stronger, quieter, yet somehow more radiant. She no longer flinched when Adrian walked by. She didn't try to impress him or fear his temper. She did her work with quiet excellence and left each evening with dignity, though shadows still lived in her eyes. And Adrian had changed too, slowly. He no longer gave her the worst jobs, no longer used her guilt as a weapon. He still kept a mask on, cold, distant, but underneath that mask, he was watching her every day, when she laughed softly with the interns, when she helped the new secretary fix the copier, and when she stayed late to water the rooftop garden even after her shift ended. Each moment was a quiet cut to his heart. Because the more he saw her, the more he cared. And the more he cared, the more he feared it. How could he love the woman who looked like Celeste, who carried her grace, but had her own soul? How could he love her after everything he'd done? Every week, he did something he'd never admit. He walked past her desk after hours when no one was around. Read the little notes she wrote to herself. Sometimes she doodled flowers, sometimes lyrics, sometimes nothing, just soft whispers on paper. It still hurts, but I still hope. He stared at it for a long time, then left without a word. On her birthday, a bouquet of white tulips was delivered to her desk with no name. Isla touched the petals, and confused. Adrian watched her from his office window, hidden behind the blinds. He saw the small smile lift her lips, and felt something inside him bloom and ache all at once. At charity galas, he pretended not to notice her elegance in the crowd. He pretended not to follow her with his eyes when she politely declined dance offers. When men tried to flirt with her, he pretended not to feel jealousy dig into his ribs. He would never touch her hand, never tell her what she meant, because he believed he didn't deserve her. One rainy night, Isla waited alone beneath the Wolfe building entrance. Her umbrella had broken, taxis weren't stopping. Adrian, from the penthouse floor, watched her standing in the storm. Without thinking, he called his driver. "Take her home. Don't let her know I sent you," he said to the driver. She was gone by the time he returned to the window, but she left something behind on the glass door, a smiley face drawn in the fog. So simple, but so heartbreakingly warm. Adrian lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. "You're falling in love," his conscience whispered. But he wouldn't confess it, not because it wasn't real, but because his love had already ruined one woman. He wouldn't risk ruining Isla too. So he loved her in silence. From behind the glass, behind the doors, behind the pain. Never saying a word but hoping one day, maybe she'd feel it anyway. The storm that night was loud, louder than the city lights, louder than the memories, louder even than the silence Adrian and Isla had grown used to sharing. She had asked to see him after hours. No assistance, no formal reason, just a single, quiet message left on his desk in her delicate handwriting. "I need to speak about her." Adrian found her in the rooftop garden. The air was soaked in rain and moonlight, and a half-finished bottle of wine rested beside her on the bench. She had clearly been drinking, something rare for her. Isla looked up at him as he approached, her eyes glassy and red-rimmed, but not from the alcohol alone. "You came," she whispered. He said nothing. Just watched her and waited. Isla stared into the glass in her hand, swirling the remaining drops of crimson. "I've never told anyone the whole story," she said. "Not the police, not my lawyer, not even myself out loud." Adrian leaned against the cold marble wall, arms crossed, unreadable, but every muscle in his chest had tensed. "It wasn't supposed to be me," Isla began. "I was driving my roommate's car that night. Not mine, I wasn't supposed to be out, I had been drugged earlier that evening at a party. I didn't know, I didn't even realize what was happening until the headlights caught her in the rain, and then it was too late." Her voice cracked. She clutched the empty glass tighter. "She looked just like me," she said, with her lip trembling. "I saw her face just before the impact. And I see it every time I close my eyes." Adrian's jaw clenched, but still, he said nothing. "I wanted to die after it happened," she choked. "But I lived, and your eyes when I walked into your office the first time, they were fire. I knew you hated me. And I thought, maybe that's what I deserve." Tears poured down her cheeks now, her breath shaking as the weight of a year's silence poured out. I've lived every day of my life trying to make up for it, for something I'll never be able to fix. I am so sorry, Adrian. I am so, her voice broke, she sobbed into her hands. And still, he said nothing, because his mind was splitting apart. He had imagined that night 1,000 ways. Rewritten it in his head, assigned her every cruelty. But the woman in front of him was broken too. Not careless, not evil. Just ruined by the same night that ruined him. Later, back inside the building, Isla leaned heavily against the glass wall of his office, her voice quieter, slurred slightly from the wine. I want to give you something, the only thing I have left, she said. Adrian looked at her, stunned. What are you talking about? He asked. She stepped closer, sadness flooding her features. You've taken everything from me already, she whispered. Just take this too. I don't want it to be mine anymore. She reached for his shirt, trembling. Adrian caught her wrist, not harshly, but firmly. Isla, he said, his voice low, I owe you something, she breathed. Let me give it to you. Let me repay you. He froze, his heart screamed no, but something in his soul, the place where love had been quietly living for a year, ached at the pain in her offer. She wasn't doing this out of desire, this was sorrow, this was sacrifice. He should have stopped her, should have walked away. But her eyes, her trembling voice, her shattered soul mirrored everything inside him. And his love, unspoken, buried deep, rose. He didn't speak, he didn't smile, he simply took her hand and led her to the couch by the window. Their bodies met in quiet surrender, not in lust, but in longing. It was not violent or hungry, but mournful. Gentle, slow, every touch carried the ache of what was lost, the grief of what they never meant to share. He kissed her forehead after, and when she fell asleep against his chest, tears still on her lashes. Adrian stayed awake the rest of the night, staring at the ceiling, wishing for the first time in a long time that maybe love could still exist in the ashes. The morning sunlight slipped through the tall glass windows of Adrian Wolfe's penthouse office, casting golden light across the polished floor, the garden balcony beyond, and the empty couch where Isla had once laid, warm, quiet, peaceful. But now, the space beside him was cold. Adrian reached out instinctively, eyes still half closed, expecting to find the softness of her hair, the weight of her presence. But there was nothing. He sat up slowly, confusion creeping into his chest like fog. Isla? He called hoarsely. The room was full of silence. His heart beat faster as he rose, walking through the space like a man lost in a nightmare, checking the kitchen, the guest room, even the rooftop greenhouse. She was gone. Only one thing remained behind, a single white envelope left on his desk, leaning against the empty wine glass from the night before. It had his name on it, his hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Dear Adrian, by the time you read this, I will already be gone. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to face you again. What happened last night was not just a moment between two broken people. It was a moment I will never forget. And that's exactly why I have to leave. You've lost someone you loved once. I could feel it in every part of you. Celeste was light, and I will never compare. I never should have been in your life to begin with, not in the way I was. You say nothing, but your silence has always spoken louder than words. And last night, it told me you feel something, even if you'll never say it. But love should not come from pain, it shouldn't be built from guilt and sorrow. And I refuse to be someone's punishment or redemption anymore. I need to find out who I am, outside of tragedy, outside of you. And maybe, one day, when we're both healed, we'll meet again. Maybe you'll even smile when you see me. But if not, know this. You weren't the villain in my story, you were just as lost as I was. And I loved you too. Isla, the letter dropped from Adrian's fingers. He stared blankly ahead, the world around him suddenly quiet, too quiet. The ache in his chest cracked wider than before. It was worse than the first time he lost someone. Because this time, he had been the one who drove her away. Another woman he had loved, and lost. He walked to the rooftop garden that afternoon, alone. The roses she had planted were blooming. White, full of peace, untouched by the storm that had passed. Adrian stood before them, the wind brushing against his face. For once, he let the weight of silence fall fully on his shoulders. There was nothing left to control, only one truth remained: he had loved her, and he might never get the chance to say it. For the first time in his life, Adrian Wolfe, billionaire, untouchable, feared and admired, couldn't control the outcome. He had conquered cities, reshaped industries, rebuilt empires from the dust. But now, when it mattered most, he couldn't find the one person who mattered. Because Isla Moreno was gone, vanished without a trace. And the man who had everything realized, far too late, that he had thrown away the only thing that could have saved him. The first week after her disappearance, Adrian didn't leave his penthouse. He read her letter over and over, memorizing each word as if they were scripture, as if they could answer the aching questions screaming inside him. Why didn't I stop her? Why didn't I speak? Why did I let grief punish her when she was only ever kind? He didn't eat, barely slept. When his reflection stared back at him in the mirror, he saw a man with sunken eyes and hollow silence behind them. A man who hated himself. By the second week, his obsession began. He made calls, pulled favors, mobilized his entire network. Private investigators, offshore contacts, airport surveillance. Every known friend or place she'd ever mentioned. He even visited her old neighborhood, alone, in the pouring rain, hoping, praying for a sign. There was none. She's gone, one of his assistants whispered to another behind closed doors. She disappeared like someone who wanted to stay lost. And they were right. Because Isla hadn't just run from Adrian's world, she had erased herself from it. Months passed. Adrian kept searching. Every report that came to his desk, every face he saw on the street, he scanned for her eyes, her softness, her quiet strength. And every time he didn't find her, it destroyed him a little more. He poured money into her last known charity project anonymously. Kept her office space untouched, replayed camera footage of her walking through the halls like a ghost. He whispered apologies into empty rooms, he screamed into the night when no one could hear, "I'm sorry Isla, I'm sorry." But the world gave him no reply for 5 months. That's how long it had been when his head of security placed a final folder on his desk. "We've reached the end of every lead," the man said solemnly. "No records. No aliases, she's not in the country, and she doesn't want to be found." Adrian didn't speak. He simply nodded once, then stared at the folder like it was a coffin. After the door shut and he was alone again, he stood and walked to the garden. The roses had begun to wilt with the coming cold. He knelt before them. Touching one soft petal, he whispered, brokenly, "I didn't know how to love you until you were gone. And now, He feared he would carry that regret forever. 5 months had passed, 5 months of silence, of empty nights and cold mornings. 5 months of Adrian Wolfe carrying a storm inside him, buried beneath suits and silence. He had almost given up, almost. Until one evening in late autumn. As golden leaves danced along the streets of a sleepy coastal town far from the towering skyline of his empire, fate stirred again. It began with a phone call. "Sir," came the voice of one of his last trusted security men. "You asked us to keep our eyes open. There may be something." Adrian sat up, tension slicing through him like lightning. "Where?" he asked, voice dangerously low. "Faymore Village, small seaside town. One of our delivery men spotted someone who looked like her outside a local clinic. He wasn't sure at first, but then he remembered the photo and..." "And what?" "She's pregnant, sir." The world went still. Adrian gripped the edge of his desk, his lungs forgetting how to breathe. "Are you certain?" he asked. "The resemblance is undeniable, and she was alone." The line fell silent. "Then sir, what do you want us to do?" Adrian didn't answer right away. Because in that moment, the memories rushed back, her broken voice, her soft warmth, her trembling hands that night she offered herself to him. The guilt and the sorrow. And now, the weight of a new truth: she hadn't just taken herself away. She had taken a piece of him with her. Faymore Village was quiet, the kind of place where days moved slowly, where people waved to each other on porches and where no one asked too many questions. Isla had chosen it for that very reason. She didn't want to be found, not yet. Not when her heart still trembled from everything she had been through, not when her body now carried something so delicate, so innocent, something theirs. She often sat by the cliffs at sunset, one hand resting on the small swell of her belly, the other holding a cup of warm chamomile tea. Her eyes reflected the sea, turbulent, deep, and hiding so much sorrow. The baby had changed her. It reminded her that life could still grow in the ashes. That love, no matter how broken, had left behind something worth living for. But she never imagined he would find her. Not now, not here. That night, as she stepped out of the tiny village store, balancing a paper bag of fruit and baby vitamins, her eyes caught a shadow by the old oak tree. Tall, still, and familiar. Her heart stopped. The wind curled around her coat as she blinked, frozen. He stepped forward slowly. Adrian. Dressed simply, no guards, no black cars, no distance between them. Just a man, tired, regretful, and painfully human. Her breath caught in her throat. She gripped the paper bag tighter, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. For a long moment, they just stared. He looked at her belly, then into her eyes. And whispered, almost like a prayer, "Isla." She didn't speak, she didn't run, but a tear slid down her cheek. Because she knew this moment would change everything again. The village wind grew still, even the rustling trees quieted, as if nature itself held its breath. Isla's pulse thundered in her ears as Adrian stepped closer, slowly, cautiously, like a man approaching something sacred and fragile. The man who once caused her the most pain now stood before her looking broken. Not with arrogance or control, but with something far heavier like regret. "I didn't come here to take you back," he said quietly. "I came to say I'm sorry." Her fingers tightened around the paper bag, her other hand instinctively hovered over her stomach, as if protecting the tiny life growing inside. Adrian noticed. His eyes flicked down for just a second, and when they returned to hers, they glistened. "I didn't know," he whispered, voice cracking. "If I had, you would have hunted me down faster." Isla cut in, her voice sharper than she intended. She winced, breathing in deep. "Or would you have blamed me for that too?" Adrian's face darkened, not with anger, but shame. "I would have tried to make it right sooner, but I know that's not enough." The silence between them stretched. Isla could feel her heart tearing in two directions. He had hurt her deeply and intentionally. For months, he made her suffer to punish a wound that was never her fault. His silence had screamed louder than any word, and yet, beneath it all, she had felt his unspoken care too. But now that she was carrying his child, things weren't so simple. She took a shaky breath, eyes locked to the dirt path beneath her boots. "You didn't love me," she said, more to herself than to him. "You just loved her, and I looked like her, that's all." "No." His answer came quickly, steady. "That's not true. I was angry, grieving, and I hated the part of me that began to love you even when I tried not to." Her gaze snapped to his. "Then why didn't you say it?" "Because I thought I didn't deserve you." The words hit her like thunder. "I hurt you, I used your guilt. I made you feel small to satisfy my grief. And then I realized too late. You were the only thing keeping me human," he said. His voice softened. "And now you're carrying the only part of me that still has a future." Isla's eyes filled with tears. "You think just saying sorry can fix everything?" she whispered. "Do you know what it was like to walk away without knowing if you even cared?" "I was alone, Adrian. Not just with this baby, but with everything." "I know," he said gently, "and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to undo the pain I caused, if you'll let me." She turned away, the emotions inside her clashing like waves in a storm. "Fear, anger, love, and hope. I don't know if I can trust you," she said honestly. "I don't even know if I trust me anymore." He stepped back, nodding slowly. "I won't ask you to decide now," he said. "I just want you to know I'm here. Not because I'm the father, not because I want to fix my reputation." He looked at her like she was the only thing that ever mattered. "I'm here because I love you, Isla. And this time, I'm not going to leave." That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of her small cottage, watching the moon glow across the water. One hand on her belly, the other on her heart. She didn't know what came next. But one thing was certain: forgiveness wasn't easy, but love, if it was real, deserved a chance to prove itself. The days in Faymore turned slow again, like the sea tides that rolled in and out of Isla's quiet coastal cottage. But everything had changed. Adrian Wolfe was still in town, not demanding, not pressuring, just present. It was a strange thing to see the most powerful man, Isla, once cold, controlling, untouchable, sitting in the back row of the local church on Sundays, holding a cup of tea outside the village clinic, or silently leaving a small paper bag of groceries at her doorstep when she wasn't looking. He never knocked. He never imposed, he was simply there. Watching, waiting, and hoping. The first time she saw him helping at the village garden project, Isla almost laughed out loud. Adrian Wolfe. Digging soil in worn jeans and a faded blue t-shirt, she said in her thoughts. But he didn't glance her way, didn't flaunt his presence. Instead, he listened to the elderly gardener explain how the roots needed care, just like people. And when a child dropped their watering can, Adrian knelt to help without saying a word. It wasn't for show, it was something else, and something real. He stayed in the town inn, quiet, modest, clean. He never told anyone who he was. To them, he was just Adrian from the city, who came to rest. But Isla knew better, and that was what made it hard. Some nights, she would watch from her window, spotting him walking near the cliffs, the same cliffs where she once sat alone. He never tried to speak unless she did, until one day, she found a notebook placed near her porch flowers. Inside were pages filled with his handwriting, each dated from the day she left. I saw your old hairpin on the bathroom counter today. Didn't throw it away, because I couldn't. I told myself I hated you, but I think I hated how kind you were, because I didn't know how to accept kindness without breaking apart. You didn't just carry my child, you carried the truth I couldn't face. I would give up every company, every coin, if I could undo what I did to you. Isla read every letter, crying quietly with her back against the door. Because she realized that love didn't always arrive with flowers and declarations. Sometimes it arrived as patience, or as presence. As a quiet man digging in the garden, hoping to be forgiven one day. One afternoon, her steps faltered when she passed the town bookstore and found him inside, holding a baby book. He hadn't seen her. He flipped through the pages, his brows slightly furrowed, lips silently sounding out unfamiliar baby terms. She stepped away before he noticed. But something in her heart softened. A crack, a thread of warmth she hadn't allowed in months. Because Adrian wasn't trying to win her back, he was trying to become worthy of being near her again. And slowly, Isla realized he might already be. For weeks, the door remained closed. Though Adrian never knocked, he always lingered nearby. He left quiet signs, fresh vegetables from the market, warm bread from the local baker, tiny hand-carved wooden toys from the village craftsman. Never with a note. Never asking for anything in return. Isla noticed every one. She'd touch the handle of her door at dawn, pause, and walk away again. Her heart battled fear, memory, and longing. Could she really let him back in? Could she trust that he had changed? But most of all, could she trust herself not to fall for him again? It was a Sunday morning when everything finally shifted. She stood in the kitchen, gently stirring a pot of oatmeal. The baby kicked, soft, fluttering. A reminder that time was moving forward whether her heart was ready or not. There was a knock, for the first time. Not a delivery left silently, not a letter slipped under the door. A knock. Isla's heart jumped. She walked slowly to the door, pressing her palm flat against the wood. She didn't speak. I know I said I wouldn't, Adrian's voice came, low and hesitant, but I just needed to see you today, even just for a moment. They pause. I saw a little boy playing by the docks earlier. He had your eyes. Her breath caught. I'm not asking for anything, he said. Not permission, not a place in your life, I just wanted to tell you that I'm proud of you. For being strong when I wasn't, for protecting the life we created when I didn't even deserve to be a part of it. Then a soft whisper, but if there's still a place for me, even just a small one, I'll never take it for granted again. Isla stood frozen. Then, without another thought, just instinct, just heart, she slowly turned the knob. The door creaked open, there he was. Wearing a plain white shirt, a hopeful ache in his eyes, and a red tulip in hand. Isla looked at the flower, then at him and stepped aside. "Come in," she said softly. The cottage smelled of cinnamon and honey. The baby room down the hall had soft blue curtains and a half-finished mural Isla had started painting by hand. Adrian stepped in carefully, like he was entering a sacred space. He noticed everything, but mostly, he noticed her. She had grown stronger, softer in some ways, harder in others. Her beauty hadn't changed, but the woman standing before him now. She no longer feared silence, she owned it. They sat at the table. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Isla broke the silence. "I used to dream of this moment, but in my dreams, I slammed the door." Adrian's lips curled faintly. "You had every reason to." "I don't know what happens next," she said, eyes fixed on her tea. "I'm still angry, still scared, but I also." She glanced at her belly. "I want him to know his father, the man you're becoming, not the man I ran from." "Thank you," he said happily. "But, I won't open this door twice," she warned him. He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then I'll never give you a reason to close it again," he said. That night, Adrian didn't stay. He kissed her hand before leaving, but not her lips. It was respect, it was patience, it was love, relearned the right way. And Isla, as she lay in bed with her hand resting over her belly, whispered softly, "He's trying, baby, he's really trying." For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because finally, it could be. One day, Isla is giving birth. The room was quiet, but not empty. Sunlight spilled through gauzy curtains, painting golden light over the soft blue walls. A tiny cry echoed gently, then quieted. Adrian stood by the hospital window, holding the smallest, most perfect thing he had ever known, wrapped in a sky-blue blanket. His son blinked up at him with sleepy eyes and a wrinkled forehead. Adrian couldn't speak, he only breathed, and in that breath, he knew, he was no longer just a man seeking forgiveness. He was a father and his whole life had changed. Isla lay in bed, exhausted but glowing, her skin was pale, her hair clinging to her cheeks, and yet, Adrian had never seen her more beautiful. "You look like a miracle," he whispered, returning the baby to her arms. She smiled faintly. "Feels like one." Adrian sat beside her, silent for a long while watching. And for once, not questioning the timing, only knowing it had to be now. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small and wrapped in velvet. "I was going to wait," he said quietly. "But I realized some moments shouldn't wait." Isla's breath caught. Her fingers froze on their son's tiny hand. Adrian stood, heart in his throat, and gently lowered himself to one knee beside her hospital bed. "I don't want to love you from a distance anymore," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Not from the garden, not from the other side of a door. I want to love you up close, every morning, every night, and every time our son cries, or smiles, or takes his first step." Isla's eyes brimmed with tears. "I don't want to keep proving I've changed, I want to live it beside you every day." He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple but elegant. A single rose-shaped diamond resting on a thin band, gentle and honest, just like her. "I'm not asking you to forget the past," he said. "I'm asking you to build the future with me. As my wife, as the mother of our son, and as the only woman I've ever truly loved." Isla didn't speak for a moment. She looked at the baby in her arms, at the tiny hand curled around her finger. At Adrian, kneeling, heart bare, more vulnerable than he'd ever been. And then she smiled. A quiet, knowing, tearful smile. "I was never waiting for a perfect man," she whispered. "Only for the man who'd choose love over pride." She reached out her hand. Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. And with her voice barely audible over the sound of her son's sleepy sighs, she said, "Yes." They kissed, gentle and full of promise. And in that small hospital room, under the early glow of fatherhood and healing love, Adrian Wolfe knew, the girl he once broke had become the woman who saved him. And she was finally his, not out of guilt, not from grief, but because they had found their way through pain, and still chosen each other. It had been 2 years since Isla walked into the soft arms of spring wearing a simple ivory dress, and whispered "I do" beneath a canopy of wildflowers. 2 years since Adrian Wolfe, once untouchable and sharp-edged, vowed not just to be her husband, but her home. They didn't need a grand wedding, the chapel by the sea was enough. Close friends, quiet vows. Their son babbling in Isla's mother's arms, a flower crown slipping over his baby curls. Adrian wept when Isla walked down the aisle, openly, freely. And Isla, seeing the rawness in his eyes, knew then, she'd made the right choice. Not for the sake of the past, but for the future they were now living. Now, their mornings began with sleepy kisses and tiny footsteps. Their son, now nearly 2, was a ball of energy, curious, bright-eyed, with Isla's calming smile and Adrian's stubborn brows. He called Isla Mama and Adrian Da, and sometimes called the garden cat Car. Their house was filled with soft music. Wooden toys scattered across the floor, and the scent of fresh-baked bread on weekends, Adrian had learned, clumsily but with love. Adrian still ran his company, but from the countryside now. He chose calm over chaos. He no longer chased power, he chased joy. He chased Isla through the backyard during water fights. He chased their son around the garden, he chased every chance to be better, because he wanted to, not because he had to. Isla painted again. In the mornings, on the porch, with her hair tied back and their child coloring beside her. Sometimes she painted the sea, sometimes she painted wild roses, and sometimes, she painted him. Adrian often found her sketches hidden in her journal, his laugh. His profile while holding their son, his hand brushing her hair back. He never said a word, but he kept one in his wallet. One autumn evening, while lying in the grass beneath stars, Isla whispered, "Do you ever think of Celeste?" Adrian nodded slowly, "I miss who I was with her. But I love who I've become with you." Isla rested her head on his shoulder, tears soft in her eyes. That's what healing is, isn't it? Keeping the memories but no longer letting them control the story. He kissed her hair and said, "Exactly." And so, their story continued. Not in perfection, but in peace. In shared effort, in forgiveness that no longer felt heavy. A man once driven by vengeance had been softened by a woman he once blamed, and that woman, once lost in guilt, found grace in his growth. Together, they built a love that didn't erase pain, but rewrote it. With each sunrise, with each tiny laugh echoing through their home. And with each quiet, ordinary day where nothing hurt anymore. Only love remained.